Behringer XR18 and OBS right now. Let's go! This is going to be the Mac version, but when it's ready, the PC version will be linked up here and down here, so make sure you watch whichever one makes the most sense for you. Unlike PC, there's no USB audio drivers that you need to install to use your XR18 with your Mac. Once you plug it in, it's recognized as an audio device and it's ready for your use. Alright, the very first thing we have to do is make sure that our XR18 is set up the correct way for multi-track sends to and from the computer. To do that, we're going to go into the QuickEZ software. I'm going to pull that over here. And we're going to go to our setup button, and then we're going to go to the audio MIDI tab. Here under USB interface, you have two choices, 2-channel or 18-channel. So 2x2 means you've got 2 channels going in each direction. 1 and 2 going from the mixer to the computer, and 1 and 2 going from the computer back to the mixer. And 18x18 is the same thing, only you've got 18 channels going in each direction instead of only 2. If you're only going to be using 2 channels in each direction, you can leave it here. But if you're going to use the full capabilities of the mixer to send and receive information, then you're probably going to want to have it set to 18x18. The next thing we need to do is tell our Mac to output all of our audio to our XR18 mixer. To do that, you come up to the Apple menu, you choose System Settings, and then in System Settings, you scroll down to the Sound tab, and then under the Output tab, make sure that you have X18, XR18 selected. Now let me be clear, if you don't want to send all of your computer audio out to the mixer so you can listen to it through the speakers attached to the mixer, you don't have to. You can then choose any other audio output device you have here and listen to your computer playback that way. But if you want to be able to hear your computer output through the speakers attached to your Behringer, you need to choose this method right here, X18, XR18. Something worth noting here, even though there's multiple channels available on the USB cable, there's a lot of bandwidth there, Mac forces you to output your computer audio over the USB channels 1 and 2. You are restricted to that stereo pair. Now this is a little different than what we're going to do in OBS. This is just sort of your daily output of your computer to the mixer. You are restricted to using USB returns 1 and 2 only. And so right now we're going to look up at how to set that up in your mixer. So let's go to the XR edit or the XR edit, and what we're going to do is we're going to choose our channel 1, and we're actually going to look at the input tab up here. We can do some of this stuff in the channel tab as well, but the input tab shows us everything that we need. You can see right now it's set to analog to digital, meaning that is our physical input on the mixer, but over here we have a USB button. If I click this channel strip right here is now set to receive signal from USB 1. If I go over to 2, you can see that I've got the same selection, so I would select USB and it would be USB 2. Now, because we have a drop-down list here, you don't have to put USB 1 and 2 on channel strip 1 and 2. You can do that anywhere. I could go over to 10 and I could set this to be USB input 1, and now I've got control of that return here on channel strip 10. You can put it anywhere you want. For today, we're just going to leave everything on 1 and 2. So let me put this back to 10. So come back over here to 1. And what we want to do also is do a stereo link. So I'm going to click this. And now channel strip 1 and 2 are linked, which means we've got our left and our right returns from the computer to the mixer. So 1 is set to USB 1. 2 is set to USB and USB return 2. Our USB trims are here. So let's look. If I set this USB trim on 1, it is now the same on USB 2. So that's another parameter that's linked, just like the faders here. With that set, anything we play out of our computer now will show up on these 2 channel strips, and if we raise them and raise our main left-right fader with it unmuted, we would hear any of our computer playback through the speakers attached to our main left and right outputs. All right, so now that we've set up our return channels into the mixer so we know we can get sound back to it to hear what we're doing, let's have a look at OBS. So here we are, And what you're going to do is you're going to come into your settings tab right away, and you're going to go to the audio tab, and you can see we've got global audio devices here. Desktop audio 1 and 2, as well as mic aux audio 1 through 4. So you can think of these desktop audios kind of like outputs, and everything in here is disabled by default. Now, if you wanted to go in and add your desktop audio, very likely you are not going to be able to change this. You can see I've got a couple of choices here, but you likely won't have this unless you've got something like Black Hole installed. Black Hole is a piece of software that lets you route signal, specifically audio signal, from app to app or app to input or output device. So if you need to have your desktop audio 1 and 2 working, you're going to need something like Black Hole installed. Otherwise, Mac is very restrictive about what applications it allows access to the audio stream for recording purposes. It's a security thing. You don't actually need this for what we're doing today, so we can ignore these two and just look at our mic auxiliary audios 1 through 4. So what I'm going to do is on this first one, I'm going to change this from disabled to XR18. Now that I've done that, when I click OK, you'll see we have a device now added to our OBS audio mixer. If I click on these ellipses, I can go to Properties, and we can see we've got our device listed as XR18 here, and Enable Down Mixing is on. I'm going to turn this off, and that's probably what you're going to want to do too. What happens when down mixing is on is it forces a stereo channel for everything that's coming in. By default, that's 1 and 2. You could change this to 2 and 3, or literally any other two choices. And if you turned down mixing back on, it would then force everything to use the two channels that you chose in succession. So if you choose 2 here, it's going to force it to be 2, 3. If you chose 3, it's going to force it to be 3, 4. Just so you know. You're probably not going to want to do this. You're going to want to leave this unselected so that you have full control over what's patched where. Knowing that that's the case, let's set this back to 1, and we'll set this back to 2 for now. I'm going to click OK, and you can see there's a little bit of signal here. Now you're seeing signal because I have a microphone here, and it's patched into the physical input number 1 of the mixer. So that goes out on USB send from the mixer to the computer and into OBS. And you're seeing it's only on one side. Why is that? Why is it only on what would be the left side? Well, if we come back in here to Properties, you can see that we've got input 1 on the first input, so channel 1, which means that's going to be the left side. And we've got a completely separate input, which is input number 2 on the right side. So there's a couple of things you can do here. I could physically patch something into channel 2, and then I would have control or, feed of 2 separate tracks or 2 separate inputs right here on the left and right side of this input. Cool, except you don't really have full control over both of those devices once they're in here. So you could come back into Properties, and you could set this to be 1 if you wanted, and then you can see now we've got it on both the left and right. But ideally, the thing to do is go back into Properties and set this second to none. Now this is something you can't actually do on PC. This is a Mac only thing, and it's kind of cool. So we're not wasting another channel. We're not duplicating a signal on our own, which could potentially lead to issues. We're letting the software do it for us. So we are leaving this on 1, and now that we've done that and we've selected nothing for the second side, we're going to right click and choose Advanced Audio Properties, which gives us this window. And you can see for our mic aux input there's a mono button. If I click this mono button, we now have a proper mono signal showing up on the left and the right side of this input, avoiding any potential issues of duplicating things ourselves. This is just the safest way to do it. It's basically the same thing, but it's just easier and cleaner to do it this way. And what this does is it now leaves you the ability to go back into your settings and go into your audio tab again. And for the second, third, and fourth, you could add your XR18 again. And for each one you add, you're going to get another control here in your audio mixer. And then you could go back in here to your second instance and turn off down mixing and change this to something stereo. Maybe you've got something stereo on 3 and 4, or you could just set it to 2 and turn this one to none, and then go back into our advanced audio properties, change this to mono as well, and then you would have 2 completely controllable mono instances of what's on your input 1 and your input 2. You can change that to any of the inputs in your mixer to match what you've got going on. This is just how you get it into the system. So great, we've got this in. We can see that signal is flowing on that first one because that's what we've got patched. But how do we actually hear what's happening? Well, let's go back into our advanced audio properties. And you can see here for our mic aux 1, audio monitoring. Currently, it's set to off. So I'm going to change this to monitor only. I could change it to monitor only or monitor and output. Either one. Let's do monitor only first. And now, check 1, 2. You can hear it coming out of this speaker, and you can see it showing up here on the return. So if I turn that off, you see we lose it in our mixer because this fader 1 and 2, these are the returns, the USB returns from the computer to the mixer, as we set here. I should point out too, just to be safe, for channel strips 1 and 2, because we set it to our USB returns, I actually turned the analog inputs to off, just to avoid confusion. Because you can actually leave this set to an input and then jump back and forth, but just don't confuse yourself. Turn it to off if you're only going to use these for the returns. Anyway, we can see that it's disappeared here, and that is because we've turned the monitor back off. So we did monitor only. Let's do monitor and output. Same thing. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. So it's coming back. That's how we monitor what's happening in OBS. We set whatever we want to listen to in our audio mixer here to be monitor only or monitor and output, and then we can control its playback on our speakers connected to our XR18 with these faders here, and of course with our master fader. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Now something else I should point out to you. I did mention that this is plugged into 1, and you can see that on channel strip number 1 here, I've turned the analog input off. So how are we actually hearing this? How are we getting signal in here? Well, the reason we're still hearing it despite the analog input being turned off is because even though we've turned it off here for the channel strip, it's not technically off. The signal is still going into input 1, and input 1 is still going out on USB send number 1, which is what we have this set to here. So that signal is going regardless of what we're doing. If we wanted to have some control of this as well, we could turn this back on and jump back and forth, but you can also just move this over to another channel strip. Just like I showed you that we could move the return control over to 10 or wherever we want, I could go to channel strip 3, and instead of analog input 3, I could change this to 1, and now you'll see the signal here. So I now have some control of this microphone here. And I can also change the mic gain here. So you'll notice I just pulled the mic gain way down and we lost the signal on 1. So that is something that you need to set. If you're not going to add your input or something to another channel strip to control, before you turn this off, you're going to want to set your gain, because that gain is also going to affect what's going out, the level of signal going out on the USB send. That's just a word of warning for you so you don't catch yourself not sending any signal and you're wondering why. So now that we've added this here, we have that gain control. We could also turn this up if we wanted to hear it in our main mix. Regardless of what we're actually doing in OBS, we can have different things going on at different times. We can do a full mix through our main speakers out to whatever we want. Maybe you're doing a live show, but you're also broadcasting a stream out with OBS. So your main left and rights, you're going to want to be able to hear what's happening with your inputs, like your microphones or your instruments. You can do that now. You can move things around to wherever you want on here to have the layout reflect what works best for you. Just know that channel strips do not have to be tied to the physical input you're using. All of that's pretty cool so far, but at this point you might be asking, so great. I've got my input there in the audio mixer in OBS, but it's there all the time. What if I want stuff to be only visible or available based on my scenes and sources? Well, you can do that too. So let's start by removing this. What we're going to do is go into settings, and I'm going to go to audio, and I'm going to put these back to disabled just for now. Click OK. So what we can do is we can come to our scenes and sources. So let's assume this is my first scene and I want to have an input here. I can right click, or I can click on the plus sign down at the bottom, go to add and do audio input capture. Name it whatever you want. We'll call this microphone. And up here under default, we can now set this to X18, XR18, and we have down mixing that we can unselect. And now it's exactly the same as what we did in the settings tab. You have all the same choices. You can patch things the same way we already did. So I'm going to leave this set to 1 and turn the second part of it to none. Click OK. And now let's go back into our advanced audio properties, and we're going to turn that new microphone we added to mono. And you can see now we've got it on both sides, just like we did in our last demonstration. So what we've done now is we've just made this available based on the scene and the source. So it's not there all the time. It's not taking up visual real estate you might need, or it's just not there to confuse you as to what's actually happening when you're not using it. So now we're also at the point where you might ask, hey man, what if I want to send a whole mix instead of just individual instruments? Can I do that? Could I send my main left right out? Yeah, you can do that. Let's have a quick look here. So what we're going to do in our Xr edit software is we're going to open up the in-out tab up here, and this is all of our in and output patching. So once this is open, you're going to click on the USB sends, because this is our send from the mixer to our computer / OBS. And right now you can see that this is in a pretty much a default state. In default, you're either going to be set to 1 to 18 or 1 to 16 plus the left right. So you could do this, and then you could change your inputs here to be, instead of 1, 2, you could do 17, 18, and that would give you access to that full mix. But we can also do this. I'm just going to jump back to where I was. So 1 to 18. So right now, USB 1 and 2 are what we are using to feed our input here. 1 and 2. You can see that. So what if we take 1 and 2, and instead of having it be 1 and 2 here, we change it to left and right? Will that actually give us our full mix? Let's find out. Let's close that window. And I'm going to bring some faders down. I was doing this just for a demonstration, but I will show you what I was doing with that after. So let's bring that down. Right now you can see that there is no signal here at all. Let's pull down our main left right fader. And now let's bring this up. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Cool. So we're only seeing this now with the fader up because we are using the main left right mix to send all of our signal, out on the USB sends, which we have still assigned to 1 and 2, but we've now set the main left right bus to be 1 and 2. So how come we're seeing signal over here without this master fader being up? Well, that is because our tap point, see how this is a red circle? All of these are red circles, which means it is set to analog. In this instance, it means it's just taking the signal from right at the head of the bus. So as soon as we send signal to our main bus, it's boom, it's going out to USB as well. When you're talking about a normal input, it's taking the signal right after the physical input and the gain. Not quite the same thing here, but because it's selected this way, it renders this master fader not responsible for the level going out. We can change that. We could go to our default signal tap and we could change this. Let's just go all the way to the other end. Let's do post fader. Click on these and you can see now that our signal has disappeared from OBS. So what happens if we bring, oops, I can't see that. What if we bring our master fader up now? There you go. We've got our master fader up and we're seeing signal. So we know that that is in fact using the master left-right bus to send a full mix to OBS. So we could have a whole bunch of faders up. That's why I had them up a second ago, just as a visual demonstration, that we could have a full mix going on here. And that full mix will now go out on left and right, and that whole left and right mix will show up at OBS as long as we have our inputs set to match what's happening. So if we went back, oops, not set up, if we went back into in out, put this back, let's change those tap points back to what they were before. So this is the 1 to 18. If we go to 1 to 16 plus left right, you can see that now 17, 18 are set as our main left right outputs. So we could change this. Actually, before I do that, I just want to erase this out of the way. So currently we are seeing that. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Currently we are seeing this because number 1 is set as our input, and we have that under advanced audio properties set to mono. So just so you can see, I've turned the mono off. We've only got it on one side. But we have our full mix going out now on 17, 18. So let's go back into properties, change this to 17, change this to 18, click OK, and look, we've lost signal here. And if I bring this up, now we have signal going out through our main left-right mix. But look, the main left-right fader is down. Of course, we've got this set to analog. So let's change this to post fader, change that. And now you see the signals disappeared here again. And that is because we have this fader down. If we bring up our master fader, now that full mix is going out to OBS. Cool. Now you know how to send your full mix using left-right. Well, what if you're using left-right for people in the room with you, but you still want to send a full mix that's completely controllable, independent from the left-right house mix to OBS? What can you do? Well, you could use an aux send instead. So you can see right now, bus 5, I have it stereo linked with bus 6. If you select the bus and then select the bus master fader in the channel tab right here, that's where you can stereo link things. So as soon as you stereo link bus 5, it's automatically linked with bus 6. So now bus 5 would be left, bus 6 would be right, and anything we send to 5 or 6 will show up in both of them. And you can change your panning, but you can send a full mix out 5 and 6. So how do we get that into our OBS input? Well, let's come back up to in out. So right now we have the main left right set down here on 17, 18, but we could set that to bus 5 and bus 6. So now let's bring up our master fader for bus 5, and you can see that signal has now come back on both 5 and 6. 17, 18, 17, 18. And again, these are blue. If we change, and because they're blue, that means the master fader for those buses actually affect what's going out. But if we change this back to analog, you can see that signal's now going despite the master fader for those buses being down. Now, these aren't your only two choices. You could use any of these choices and they all do things slightly differently. But we could do pre-fader and mute. Let's change it to that. So now the signal is going to go regardless of this fader position, just like when it was set to analog. But we've added the mute button in here. So if I actually mute the buses, the mute works. So it'll turn off the send. Where if we didn't have pre-fader plus mute selected, if we just did pre-fader, that mute button no longer does anything, just like the fader. So if I mute it, you can see the signal still going. So you have all of these choices down here, and you can play with them to figure out what's the right choice for you. So before we wrap this up, there's something very important that I want to point out to you so that you don't find yourself in a sticky situation with a feedback loop. So really quickly, we are going to change the routing here from our bus back to our left right, and we'll just use the left right on 17, 18 for now. So let's close this up and we'll go back to our main left right here. So remember, We are now using the main left right to send our full mix out to OBS. Cool. But remember, these first two faders are set as our returns from OBS to our mixer so that we can monitor what's happening inside OBS. Well, what happens if we go into our advanced properties and we turn monitoring on for this input? We can see that it shows up here now. Okay, cool. But let's watch what's happening here with our main mix. We've created a scenario for ourselves where it would be very easy to create a feedback loop, because with our main mix functioning, if we're listening to our main mix on our speakers, but we also bring up these monitoring channels, we're now sending our full mix into OBS, and then we're monitoring OBS back out to channels 1 and 2 on our mixer, but then we bring these up to hear them, and we're now sending them back into the main mix, back into OBS again. So now we've got everything going in a big old circle. So what happens if I bring up these monitor channels? Oh, we're gonna get feedback, and we're gonna get duplicates, and we're gonna get phasing, and it's gonna sound terrible. So let's do that so you can see it happen. Check, 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 1, 2, check, 1, 2. So there you go. Just be very aware that if you are gonna send your full left and right mix out to OBS, don't monitor it coming back and bring that up into your full mix, or else you're going to end up in a really unfortunate situation. Well, there you go, friends. Now you know how to use your XR18 to send independent instruments or full mixes via your left-right or via your aux out to OBS, and you know how to monitor your OBS back into your mixer and through your attached speakers. I hope this was interesting, entertaining, educational, and if it was any of those three things, please be sure to like and share and subscribe. You can check us out on Patreon. You can join the channel down below, or you can do super thanks down below. Any of those things help the channel in a huge way, and thanks to everybody who's already contributed and who's already subscribed. Anyway, until we see you next time, thanks for watching here on QuickEZ. Bye, everybody.